Seeking the wise,
with Aaron and Alexander discussing the just philosophy,
covering self-development, emotional processing, conscious relationships, and 5 levels of overall wellness.
Welcome to the Wise podcast. Here with me is the amazing Alexander.
Thank you, everybody. So good to be here and good to be connected again with Aaron, going through another podcast here.
Yeah, and happy Independence Day, Alexander. It is July 4th that we are recording.
Yeah, we're sharing that today. So we wish everybody happy holidays and festivities. Safety.
And a safe one, too.
Yeah,
yes,
safe
one. Be responsible with those explosives out there. So I guess today, I think we're just going to see where the conversation goes and maybe start out with looking at some of like the distractions that could happen within doing the work, some of the challenges as we start doing the work, maybe some of the challenges that you've had, Alexander, and I can share some of mine and maybe just some in general that people have just to be aware of. Because I know when we start doing the work, it is new and we can fall back into our subconscious behavioral patterns. But there are some things where we could start doing the work and then think that we are continuing to do the work, but we're really just distracting ourselves with some things.
Yeah, one thing that I want to start with is simple, just misunderstandings. Like here recently, there's been conversations about people that have been attempting to be neutral in situations, because that's a big teaching in the just philosophy, and we talk about it here on the Wise podcast. But they're actually detaching, and so some have felt that they were practicing neutrality, which the practice of neutrality is so that you're not over emotional or you're not making decisions out of an emotion. You want to experience that emotion, not suppress it, let it go through its wave, so to say, and then wait till you're back in neutral before making decisions or activating communication. So that's a big misconception, because sometimes I think people justify just pulling their energy back and kind of detaching from a person, and then can even carry an energy of ego, of thinking that they're better than the other person because they're emotionally reactive and I'm not. But see, if you're detaching, that isn't the same as being neutral. So I'm very interested to hear, your experience and some input that you have on that subject.
Yeah, I have experienced that within myself and seen it within other people. And it does come from the ego. And some people have a like coping mechanism where they will invoke the ego and have like a slash and burn mentality when it comes to being hurt, where it's like, I'm not going to allow you to hurt me. So I'm going to leave the situation and not communicate. And so then they go off, maybe processing, maybe just continuing to be in victim mode, but they are unplugging from that person and they get away from it. And so there's never any facing that person or any sort of coming back together. And if you like ask them about, oh, what happened between that, they'll be in like have like a reactionary response, or even if it's not like too noticeable, it will still be there in their chest. It won't be like, oh, I wish them the best. And again, like some people will say, I wish, some people have that positive attitude as well, where they say, I wish them nothing but the best. But internally, are they really resonating with that? I think that's another thing too, is that always positive, or knowing what the end game is mentally, and they just say it, but they haven't gone through the process. And of course, I feel like this leads us back to the 3 R's, and it is that second R, that respect stage, that is missing in these situations where people are detaching and not finding neutrality.
Yes, and those 3 R's are: recognize the person or situation, respect it, show it respect, and then redirect it. And as you were saying, that second R to learn to respect it is to stop judging it. And see, I really want people to hear that all of this work is a process. It's not something that you just decide to do. And and this is where I think a lot of people, because I feel like the topic that we're on today is just maybe how we fool ourselves in while we're doing the work. And this isn't a judgment. This is an opportunity to just maybe see more clearly. And this is why it helps to have beautiful loved ones around or true brothers and sisters that can help hold us accountable, because it's very, very hard to see all of your faults. Now, some people can feel like maybe they see too many of their faults, but the main issue is that it's not seen in a beautiful work in progress. It's seen as a judgment. And many times somebody will say that they're going to stop some type of action, and then they do the action again, and then they beat themselves up and go through this whole routine. That's what I want to help people get away from, is this judgment of the self or others, and to see that this is all a process. So I'm just suggesting that the next time you're in a conflict situation and you do pull away, because we suggest that conscious communication and emotions can't typically happen simultaneously. So sometimes we need to stop the communication or the conversation in a loving way and say, hey, can we take some time and discuss this tomorrow or in 2 days? But see, the key about staying, making sure that you're not just detaching and running from the situation, is that you plan on when you're going to revisit that subject or that situation. And then you both take time in between that time to make sure that you're working on processing and coming up with stuff to discuss and to both be working towards a resolve. But I've also seen that many times when that happens, both parties don't always go do their due diligence where that is concerned. And again, this is just a sign of detaching. The person that doesn't go revisit and process it is more than likely detaching. And the person that does go back and revisit and work in processing and contemplation, meditation, see, they're not detaching. They're leaning into the friction, so to say. So I want to get your feedback, but I want to add something else here too before it slips my mind, is that I really want to discuss discipline and where discipline may be the missing ingredient that a lot of people have to take their so-called work or their self-development work to the next level. And so, first, comment, I want you to comment on the first part of my comment, and then we'll go into the second one.
Yeah, I feel like you were kind of describing a five profile type in the human design with when there is conflict, and if you're even able to have the respect for yourself, the other person, and the relationship to say, and it will take a breath and say, hey, I want to work this out. I want to communicate. Right now we're not. Right now we're emotional, so I'm going to take a step back and let's come back to that at another time when we're both more grounded and able to communicate, in a better way. Now, I've done that before, but the follow-up is the hard thing, because then, like, it still is it's like a future conflict that now it has been scheduled. I guess if the schedule isn't set right then I may try to avoid it, or I may conveniently let it slip my mind and let it go days, because after that, it's like all the emotion has, again, both people have gotten grounded and the emotion has subsided. And then it doesn't feel like there's a situation anymore, because maybe you found resolve in your mind. Maybe they found resolve in their mind, or maybe they're still waiting for me. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But but when that emotion subsides, then it doesn't feel like as big of a deal. And then I don't want to rock the boat again. I don't like
Mm-hmm.
conflict. I want to avoid it at all costs. And if I don't hold myself responsible, so that's kind of what you're talking about with the discipline, if you really truly cared about the relationship, you'd want to tie up those loose ends. Just to communicate, even if you both are good and you both have resolved it within yourselves, done the work separately, it's good to touch base because at some point there was a miscommunication.
Mhm.
And if you can come back and discuss it, I mean, there can be a lot of healing and more, growth in love, I feel like, if you can understand each other better. And I feel like that's the benefit. One of the benefits of doing this work is the understanding of each other to get out of the personal and see how that person works and understand them and accept them and love them for who they are and give them the freedom to be who they are. And so you can get that in return.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought this up because it is fairly consistent with fives in the profile of the human design. And Aaron happens to be a 3-5, and I've got a lot of clients and people close to me that are fives as well. But I think this goes deeper than that, even into like just the way most people generally are. And the main thing that I want to point out here is to start working on practicing shifting the perception that miscommunication is conflict. And I think this is extremely important for fives, but see that fear of conflict, but it's there for almost every human, I feel like, is that our society has pushed us to a point of dividing us, that the art of conversation has just been lost. The art of having different opinions and being able to accept that and discuss a certain subject without the need to change the other person's mind. And this is what I wanted to bring up, is that like when we realize that we're in a conversation that has turned heated or emotional, then yes, the suggestion is to realize that emotions have come in. It's not a judgment, it's just an assessment. And now we want to set another time to meet back up. So hypothetically, hey, tomorrow at noon, can we just meet and talk about that, talk about this again? And see, the interest in both parties at that point is to resolve it, not to get back into another negative judgment and trying to prove to each other. See, the point of separating is so that you can go get your thoughts clear in how you want to express yourself, not in how you're going to prove it to this other person. See, this is more about, see, conflict can't exist if you're just sharing a point of view, because there's nothing to conflict. I mean, I might say that, yeah, I really like this picture behind me, and somebody else might say, well, I don't really like it. That doesn't have to be confrontational. That could be like, nobody, I don't know that there's a piece of art or a piece of music that everybody likes. So this is like a view of viewing the world and viewing our relationships through an artistic view, that to really take this as a practice that you're looking to just express, not prove, and not work to disprove somebody else. So see, this is getting in the idea of who's right and who's wrong, rather than, hey, all of these opposite views have to exist. This is our pillar number 2, polarity versus duality. The opportunity is, can we take this opportunity to see this particular subject in a similar light? If not, that's okay too, because that opposite view has to exist. So, I wanted to bring in that, just it's an artistic way of looking at life, just like looking at pictures or listening to music. And if I really like a song, that like even Aaron and I have different tastes in music, very, very different. We have some things we like the same as well. But see, I don't ever see it as a conflict if I bring a piece of music, and or vice versa, he brings a piece of music to me that he really likes or I really like, and then we're not stimulated the same way. That's okay. That doesn't have to be confrontational. So see, I think this is more than just in the situation, catching it and managing it properly. I do feel like it's a a structure and a discipline that would be helpful to be created so that we are shifting the way that we're looking at communications and looking that to remember that conflict can't exist unless both parties are conflictual. So so understanding that gives a lot of power towards conscious communication.
Yeah, when you're saying that, I know I brought it up before, but do you remember when, I shared with you a song, or I shared a song on social media, and I was like, "This is the best song that's ever been made." It was
Yes.
early on in my journey, and
It was,
it
yes.
resonated with me. But now I'm like, "Man, that's embarrassing." Grown so much. Um, so be careful with those absolutes, people. That's so funny. The absolutes always get me.
Yes,
I
and I
all
mean, and with saying that as well, those absolutes are our attachments to just these like opinions or preferences. And we talk about continuously on this podcast about learning to live life in non preference. Again, that doesn't mean you don't ever have preferences, but it does mean that when you recognize that you do have a preference, be very careful that you're not seeing things clearly because you're choosing to see it a specific way rather than a more wide artistic way to see it.
So, Alexander, I'm gonna give you permission um, to act out as if you were me, okay?
Okay.
And do you remember the one absolute that I said about Tennessee?
I don't think I do.
Okay. Well, years ago, I said to you, "I will never, ever move to
Ah,
Tennessee."
I do remember that now.
I remember
Yes.
saying that, and it's so funny because that's where I live now. So,
Yes.
it just
Those
the
absolutes
universe
are
likes
tricky.
yeah, the universe likes to call your bluff.
Yes. Yes, they do. So, yes, be careful when you're using your absolutes. And with that, be careful to want everybody to agree with you. See, again, when we don't feel comfortable in our own truth and our own expressions, we need to prove it. When we do feel comfortable in the way we truly feel about something, there's just not a need to prove. And I really hope people hear that and really sit and contemplate about things that they're trying to get those around them to understand or to see, and to realize that the more the power is in the exemplification of it, and people seeing the lack of need of needing to prove it. I think that that power goes a long way.
Yeah, you said miscommunication is not conflict, and I think that's extremely important. And you've always said that if something that you said or did rubbed anybody the wrong way, to come and ask you about it because your intention is always pure and you would never
Intentionally.
was intentional. Thank you. You never intentionally do something to hurt somebody. And I've kind of adopted that because I feel the same way. And so intention is so important in these situations. And I feel like intention goes along with miscommunication because it is whether the person communicating is not saying it properly enough for that person to then absorb and comprehend what they're saying. We're all different. We're all different profile numbers in the human design, destiny cards, our astrology, whatever system you want to throw at each person. We're all different and we're all interacting with the same energies just in different ways. So these things are going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, I need to work on that, and I am. I know I'm getting better at understanding that miscommunications are not, or they don't have to be, uh, a source of conflict, and just trying to work out and ask, "Hey, what was your intention with that?" Before stepping into any sort of reaction.
Reaction, yes. And the saying that Aaron's speaking of is, for a long time when I was perplexed about how people misunderstood me. And I really started looking internally with that. And I come up with a saying that I thought was going to be like just such uh, a fixer of many things. And the saying was, if I ever say or do anything that rubs you the wrong way, please know that something has been misconstrued, because I have nothing, absolutely nothing to gain by belittling or judging somebody else. And so I've asked everybody to, hey, please come and inquire, because I'm willing to accept, due to the law of polarity, that that is going to happen. We're not always going to be understood correctly. So to have that and to be able to announce that and just say, well, okay, well, if somebody misunderstands something, they'll just come to me and talk to me about it, and we'll resolve it very quickly. But see, you've got to depend on that other person being willing to come and talk to you about that misunderstanding. And many times, if they do, it comes as an attack and a judgment. So again, here we're talking about conscious communication, and that's the intention is so important. But of course, intention isn't everything. The good intentions are the death of a wise one is another saying that I like to use. And the reason for that is it shouldn't stop with just intention. You need a so-called positive intention before you put something into motion. But you also, it's useful to have the understanding of the likelihood of how this person is going to receive this action. So taking the time to have a pure intention and then being pure in your activating of the situation or the conversation. And, but it's still possible for that person, depending on what emotional state they're in, of how they're going to receive that. So, so being aware that, I like to bring in that third step, is that take a moment to sense or to feel where that person's at, especially if you're coming with something important, and where their energy is at. Are they present? Are they fully present? Or are they distracted? Or are they multitasking? Or are they already upset? So paying attention to your environment, even though you do have a pure intention and maybe an optimal way of delivering it, the other part still is, am I truly aware of whether the other person is at a point to where they can receive this? All three of those steps are very important.
I do like, the title that you kinda gave this one was "How We Fool Ourselves," and, one of the big ones is that, this is a philosophy, so it is going to derive from our perceptions, and our perceptions are created in our mental level, in our mind. So, when doing this, we can get caught kind of in our mind, over processing, overthinking. And I feel like that is a major challenge, especially for the people who are automatically kind of, uh, astrologically programmed to be heavily in the mind.
Mhm.
So, what is, how do we catch ourselves when or what does that look like when we're too mental in this? Because again, I understand like a lot of this is mental, and you have to break through barriers through the mental. But how do we know when we're over the limit in that?
Well, here's where another step of discipline and structure can be useful. Um, the mind it's useful for the mind to learn that being still and receiving, like an antenna, is as important as generating a thought. And in order to properly receive, we have to be able to be still first. And so this is why, whether it's a meditative practice, or whether someone goes hunting or fishing or sewing, there's many different activities that people do that they don't call it meditation, but I feel like the goal is similar, that they just want to rest the mind and they don't want to think for a little while. And so this is where a practice of, every time that we want to find a solution to something, that we immediately don't just go into thinking about it. And so the very first practice here would be to, let me just go and sit still for 5 minutes. I'm not going to ask too much of people here. I'm not going to ask for an hour or something like that. But let me just go sit and be with this. Like, see, we tell our children when we put them in timeout, you just be with what you just did. But many times the parent don't truly explain that to the child, because the parent don't understand it themselves. They don't necessarily know how to just go be with something. But see, working to teach the mind that your action and your thinking is useful, but also to receive divine direction or to receive maybe a message from the universe. The more still and the less preferences that somebody has, the more clearly they're going to receive that message. So that was a long way to just basically say, I think it's useful to set a structure and a discipline daily. I do this with my 5 levels practice almost every morning. And getting into this routine to where you're actually training the mind that, hey, remember, it's useful for us to not think all the time. So, so issuing a discipline and some structure, maybe that's 3 days a week. Maybe I don't want to, I like to suggest daily because we're habitual creatures. So the more often that we do something consistently, the sooner it's going to become part of our life rather than an ongoing discipline. Because again, see, structure and discipline doesn't mean structure and discipline forever. Structure and discipline is just there until you create it to be a pattern. And then you don't have to have that structure and discipline anymore.
So staying on the topic of the mind, I've observed many people who can talk about the work, can talk about different strategies, whether it's the just philosophy or not, and they seem to have like a mental hold on it, so they understand it on the mental level. But as far as the just philosophy goes, or I mean, I guess you could apply this to any sort of like self development work. It is kind of, as we say, it's a lifestyle, and it's a change in lifestyle. Like we're completely changing how we were taught to interact in the world, and that's really how to grow on all 5 of these levels. Because if you just change like the mental, then and this is what I'm talking about is these people, they can understand it on the mental, but because they haven't changed it, changed everything in their life, like changed their perspective on everything they're doing. Not to say that it has to be like immediate and right away, but I've observed that people, some of them, when they understand it in the mental, they think that they're doing the work, and they're sort of acting it out or practicing is just in the mental, and that is important. But there are other levels that we have to eventually get to. Can you maybe expand upon like what they're missing, how they're fooling themselves?
Yes, great question. And here I'm going to bring in um, apologies we've talked about, the I'm sorries. And that I've shared many times that that phrase means absolutely nothing to me. But when somebody is truly sorry or they're accepting accountability for what they did, what I like to suggest is to be able to recognize what you did that wasn't optimal, be able to come up with what you see that you need to do different. And then the third part is how you're going to practice that every day moving forward. So the work is very similar. Is that okay? Well, once you recognize something that you should or shouldn't be doing, then okay, what is the different action that you feel like would be more useful? Okay. Then it's okay, how are you going to create a situation daily to where you can practice that new way or that new response rather than the old reaction? And if we work on those 3 things, and this is connected to recognize, respect, and redirect, the 3 R's, is that if we're able to recognize it, we're able to come up with the so-called solution, and then we're able to communicate how we're going to practice that solution. Then from the just philosophy's view, that's doing some work. But you have to go now do that day after day after day. We suggest 3 weeks to make or break a habit, 3 months to create a new lifestyle, and then 7 years to make sure that the old way is completely out at every level, even at the cellular level. So, see, in in the just philosophy's view, it can be seen that, well, once you start doing the work, you've got a minimum of 7 years before it's truly safe to say that you've done that work. And we also suggest, 100 times, practicing something a minimum of 100 times. So, see, if that's once a day, that's a third of a year. That's 4 months. And most people aren't willing, that I've ran into, willing to just discuss that they're working on something. And I'm presently 1 month into it, 2 months into it, 3 months into it, practicing it every day. That's not the typical language. So many times when somebody talks about doing the work, I'll request, well, what's your process? And that's what seems to stumble people. So here again, we're not here to judge people. I just want our listeners to realize that there's different levels of the work. And what we're discussing here is to how to optimally get the most change and growth out of using that phrase, "Oh, I'm doing my work."
Yeah, and this kind of came up for me about a month ago when I was talking to my coworker, and she asked me, like, do I have a favorite book about how to work with childhood trauma or how to talk to my inner child? And I thought about it, and then I thought about the processes that I've learned from you, Alexander, and I felt intuitively that she was just looking for more information, more information, more information, and which is very similar to many people out there. Like, they'll learn one way, and they'll learn it in the mind, and then when it doesn't change their life, they just go look for more information for another way because they're not practicing it. So they think it's going to be, oh, if I just know it, if I just get the knowledge, then it's going to just change me automatically, and that's not. Unfortunately, that's not how it works. So shout out to all the people who have been supporting us financially or in other means. But we do have the Wise Complete Conversation for $4.99 a month. You can get all of our back catalog and all of the practical tools and techniques that we talk about to help you, to help your process. A lot of these things are so basic. They're so basic, but people stumble just in the application phase.
Mhm.
And I get it. I get it because it's hard to start something new, and even if you start it for a day or two, then you might just go back if you're not on top of your priorities and your intentions about bringing this into your life. It may just like fade back, and it could be a couple weeks, and you're like, oh, I started that and then I got lost. Well, it's cool, no judgment on yourself. Just get right back on, and you just got to start it, and you just got to put the time in, and you will notice a difference within a couple months. And like I mentioned before, my like barometer is always to look back to where I was 3 months ago and to see, like, I can kind of gauge where I was in my growth. And most of the time there's a huge, like, even now after doing this work for 7-8 years, I still have like huge leaps every 3 months. And I feel like that's a good way to gauge with people how much work they're doing. It's kind of like, you take a picture of yourself before you start working out, and you look back every month. Maybe you take another picture and you can see the results. And that is like the stimuli to keep you going.
Mhm.
And you can kind of do that same snapshot process. So, just looking back on where you were.
Measuring that progress can be very inspiring for people. So I like that suggestion. And another big part here is being able to ask yourself or answer, how am I working on this spiritually? How am I working on this emotionally? How am I working on this energetically? How am I working on this physically? And I'm not using mental because, see, that's where people are stuck. They think that they can change a perception, or they get a different understanding, and then they think that automatically those other 4 levels just come into alignment. And no, there's a process. And so, between questioning how you're working on it on all 5 levels, and making sure that you have those 3 steps that I discussed, that's similar around the 3 R's of, this is what I recognize isn't optimal. This is what I see that I need to shift. And this is how I'm going to apply this daily so that I reach that goal of actual change and growth.
Yeah, I'm sure you've come across these people, Alexander, but I've come across a few people who, they know the stuff. I've had some really, deep conversations with people who I'm like, "Oh, they're on board. They know it." And then I give it a couple weeks and I'm present when whether I trigger them or they get triggered, and their reaction just, tells it all. And again, there's no judgment. It's just I've been fooling myself thinking that if somebody could talk about it, that,
Come on.
that we're like here and that I can then, I don't know if I would say be a little more loose, but I mean, maybe that's part of it. That I'm thinking that, oh, because you know this stuff, that maybe I don't have to watch myself as much.
Right. And we can get caught into that trap because that's exactly what that is. And, a good analogy here that I feel like is useful is thinking about like coaches, sports coaches. See, they have a mental understanding of the game, but they can't get out there necessarily and do what their players can do. So, see, their players have to get it on the mental level, the physical, the emotional, the energetic, the spiritual, all of it to perform at that elite level. But see, the coach doesn't. The coach can just get it at the mental level, and he's going to coach in that way. And this is why I separate, once again, coaches, therapists, and mentors. Those three titles really do three different jobs, so to say. And there's no judgment, but many people can clump those together and intertwine them, not meaning different things with those different titles. And that's what the mentor is looking towards from my view of how to help people to understand that on all five of those levels. And that comes from direct experience to where a coach or a therapist doesn't necessarily have to have had any experience with what they're helping, so-called helping somebody with. So, so I don't want to get into semantics here, but these are the importance of that. There's different levels to everything you talk about with someone, and remembering that these, I just choose to break it down in the just philosophy down to these five different levels. There's more that expands, like the physical has the chemical level as well, which is very important, but it just resides in the physical in this work. And so see, the purpose of the just philosophy is to simplify everything as much as possible. And it can always be expanded on. But what I've worked 26 years to do is to simplify it as simple as possible. And we still see how challenging it is for people to understand still the depth of what doing the work on these five levels, what conscious communication really is, what breaking family patterns and family lineage is really about. And the most important thing, the amount of time and practice that it takes to truly get these lasting results is something that, that I talk about quite often, but it is in the practice, in the doing, not just in the conceptual. And that's what this today's podcast has kind of turned out to be about.
Yeah, and just sharing my own experience of being around you, hearing, discussing these concepts. I didn't I didn't like get them all at the same time. Like I've had to take steps. I've heard the same thing said so many times, but until I had experiences to line up other things, other tools and techniques that we've discussed, I've had to have experiences to understand and get the subtle or integral energy and information out of those experiences to then understand more advanced concepts. And again, like one has been the willpower and trust. It took me like 4 years to understand that, and many conversations with you, Alexander, on the podcast and off, just to try to understand. And yeah, I think you even said it or described it to me in all different ways, and it wasn't until like maybe that fifth or sixth way when you said like the right keyword, and that has happened. And even like you've talked about certain things, and I've heard somebody else say them, and they say one word that I that I just needed to unlock some of that understanding. So
Mhm.
it is a process, and the mental is the beginning because you need an idea of the concept, but once you kind of live and walk into that concept and gain the wisdom from that, you utilize the knowledge, create the wisdom, then what is useful to you once you can grasp, the whole lesson on the 5D, um, the 5 dimensions, the 5 levels
High levels, yeah.
uh, of, uh, of the just philosophy. Then you'll get it, but until then, it is hard to really fully understand a lesson, and we will trick ourselves into thinking because we know it, but we talk about if you can learn lessons from observing other people go through them, then you may not need to learn that lesson, and I think that's true, but what about, like, if say we always talk about, touching the hot stove, so if we watch somebody touch the hot stove, yeah, we know to stay away based on their reaction of their, like, hair curling
Mhm.
scream, but, we still haven't gotten all that information. I mean, I
Mhm.
guess we can if we've ever burned ourselves, then we can tap into that, but possibly if we've never burned ourselves, then we may not be able to understand all that information.
Right, you may not, understand 100% of it, but some things I happen to feel that 90 to 95% of understanding is enough, and, like, if you happen to see somebody get excruciatingly burned, and you experience that, and maybe even a part of their healing, see, you can gain so much through empathy, through compassion, and that's the usefulness of those beautiful tools. Is that when you're in empathy with somebody going through something, see, it's like you're experiencing it too, and so that helps to carry the load, and see, that person doesn't necessarily somebody that works with a burned victim like that, I happen to feel that that experience will be enough that they don't necessarily need to go through that degree of burn actually on their physical body to have that much more information to be that much more valuable. And but see, as soon as we go into judgment of somebody, you can't judge and learn simultaneously. I haven't run into anybody with that skill set yet. It's almost like a switch goes off that when we're judging, we're not learning. And if we're learning, we're not judging. And because, see, the learner is being the investigator that we talk about. And most people are stuck in being the judge. And when you can shift that judge into the investigator, that childlike spirit, that's a big key to truly growing and learning from your environment. Now, one thing that I want to be sure to acknowledge is I really want to give Aaron a shout out here for his vulnerability, for his willingness to share. Talking about it took 3 or 4 years to learn this. Anybody that talks to me regularly at all hears me talking years all the time. Oh, it took me 5 years to get this. It took me 10 years to get this. When I talk about meditation, I like to tell people over and over that, oh, yeah, I meditated, so called meditated for 10 years before I truly had a experience of what meditation was. And then I realized, oh, I just been practicing meditation for these 10 years. But see, during those 10 years, I thought that I was meditating. I told people that I was meditating. But see, I was practicing to learn what meditation was. And then once I finally had that experience, um, I couldn't say that, yeah, I've been meditating for 10 years. No, I've been practicing meditation for 10 years, but it took me that long to truly have that experience. And that's why we do need to hear things over and over. And we're in our culture, we're too busy trying to prove what we know. And this is kind of what started this whole conversation is people talking about things that they've read or talking about things that they've heard instead of how beautiful this world would be to just contemplate this, that if people truly only spoke and gave their view on things they had direct experience with, not just knowledge of, that I'd like to challenge our listeners to just try to go a day, then maybe move it to a week, to where you only discuss things that you know, and knowing means that you've experienced, okay? Not something that you've learned, but that you know. Again, that would shorten our conversations drastically. But see, when you have the understanding that I suggest that conscious communication is about 25% words and 75% energy exchange. Again, this is why a child can hear "don't touch the hot stove" maybe 100 times from their parent. But if that child hears "don't touch the hot stove" from somebody that's been massively burned, and that kid might see the scars of that burn, see, they're going to get more from that conversation because this person carries experience. And so, see, we're stuck in the time of knowledgeable people now rather than wise people. And wise speak from their experiences. They have a knowing. And it's too bad that knowledge has that word know in it, because most people are busy increasing their knowledge of something, but not their experience, not their wisdom. So again, truth, this is why I'm able to say truth doesn't need defending. It only needs mentioning. And when somebody really speaks a truth that they live, they don't get angry about it. They don't get frustrated about it. It's very beautiful to watch somebody speak their truth that lives their truth. There's no emotion involved. It's a thing of beauty.
Yeah, I think that's how life was, before the internet.
Yeah.
I feel like
Yes.
less people talked more about things they didn't know. I appreciate the shout out. I will, receive that. That has been a big part of my intentional growth this year is to be more vulnerable. I think many people would think that I've been vulnerable throughout the years, and I've tried, but I'm trying to be vulnerable on a whole nother level. And the thing that has been pushing me to do that is just looking at death. And again, revisiting the conversation that we've had when COVID hit, and you asked me why I was so afraid of death, and it was, what are you not doing at this moment? And I can kind of simulate being on my deathbed, and what's the one thing that I would quote regret, because
Mhm.
I don't really live with regrets, but it would be not being vulnerable enough with people. That's I know that's what mine would be. So
Yeah. Powerful tool.
um yeah, I'm trying to bring that in and really push myself, and I'm getting more comfortable, every day, and I'm really enjoying it. It really means a lot, the more vulnerable I can be, and it is helping me with my own self-judgment, which has always been a thing. Because when I push myself, when I'm vulnerable, that vulnerability feels authentic, and it feels good to share, and I'm also sharing without any sort of attachment needed, because this is me. And I'm not, in question about it anymore.
Mhm.
So if somebody questions me in my vulnerability sharing, this is my experience. Like, there's nothing to question. Like,
Mhm.
I'm just sharing a part of me, and I don't even need it to be received really.
Yeah. There's not a need to prove. I think
Exactly,
that's the key.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
when you are sharing, your experiences, no one can, people can judge it and people can try to tear it down, but it's your experience. So you have the right to experience it the way you want to and to describe it, the way you want to. And then it helps to be open to changing, that perspective or expanding that perspective. Um, and that's a big part of the work is not being so set in stone of who we are and the beauty of, it's not often hearing males talk about opening up their vulnerability, but vulnerability is the highway to intimacy. So you can't have intimacy without that vulnerability. So that's the point. Like I have people from time to time where they just ask, "Well, why do you work on vulnerability?" And I say, "Well, my experience in this lifetime being a Queen of Hearts, the loving mother's card, is I want to be as intimate as I can with a small group of people, and then I want to have a different level of intimacy with as many people as possible. And that intimacy is directly connected to the vulnerability. And so I think that it's very beautiful that that's something that you've been working on. And I certainly have seen, different results as the years gone on from your growth in that area.
So I know we're winding down this episode, but I think the biggest way that we fool ourselves, like we have to talk about it, is our wants and our preferences. And that to me is connected to our honesty with ourselves. I've done this a lot where I can say that, oh, I don't want this or I don't have a preference in here, but I know deep down inside that I do. And if we don't have that relationship with ourselves, because now if I say something that is not authentic to me, or if I, yeah, even just verbalize, hey, no, you know, I don't like this, or I don't want this to happen, or whatever. Uh, my voice has gotten louder. My responding center has gotten louder, and it will actually eat me up if I'm not being authentic when I speak, because I've done a lot of work and I've gained sensitivity in those areas. Now I know when I was, a couple years ago, it was easier for me to fool myself, but it's getting harder now. So so speak about that. Speak about how our wants and preferences for ourselves. I mean, I think it's pretty evident, but this is the huge one. And the fact that it's so easy to understand, people still do it. We still do it because
Mhm.
we want what we want when we want it. And it goes back to being a child and taking a fit, and when we didn't get what we want.
Yes, and this comes down to the epidemic of our culture just wanting the rewards instantly, and it takes us away from that intimacy with ourselves when we're developing something over a long period of time. So, people that want their body to look a certain way and they put year after year after year of daily practices with that, they have different results than the person that works out maybe once a week, for a few months. And this is where, again, I'm going to bring in the discipline and the structure that we tend to feel best about ourselves when we prolong the gratification, and we tend to judge ourselves more the more we focus on instant gratification. And so it is very simple of whether you want to feel that you are getting the results right away, or that you use your language and your energy in a way to where you're always building towards something. And see, that building energy is so much more powerful than the gratification. Like, it's a reason that I typically like, and this isn't always the case, but many times, a band's first and second album the best. Because, see, once they reach a certain level of prominence and recognition, they're not as hungry as they were when they were just playing music to play music, and it wasn't about how much money that they can make. And so I think a lot of people can look at that analogy to when they are constantly giving themselves what they want, when they want it, the way that they want it, then see that is devoured, and then we're on to the next thing, and that never ends. But if somebody sets a want into something that is like, okay, I would like to lose 35 pounds, and I'm going to give myself 6 to 8 months to do that. And I'm just going to work every day to work towards that. And so that means I'm going to work out, 5 out of 7 days a week, or 6 out of 7. But see, that doesn't mean that every day that person's going to work out. That means there's going to be a lot of days that they don't want to work out, a lot of days that maybe somebody doesn't want to take the time to meditate. But the one that gets better at that is able to set their preference to the side and still follow through with their commitment. And this is just the general rule that if you're following your desires and your wants, you're always going to be hungry. But if you plan a meal and you work towards developing that meal all day, then you'll be fully fulfilled after eating that meal, while knowing that the body's going to burn that energy off and there's going to be another meal and there's going to be another meal. So, see, this just comes down to intimacy is about wanting deeper levels of experience. And normally that intimacy has to be developed to where instant gratification gives you only a certain level of intimacy, but it gives it to you right now. So as we change those levels that we're interested internally, it changes the external connections with others and with material things and things like that. So again, as without, so within. So anytime that you want to know where you're at, pay attention to externally how you're acting, how you're being. What are you chasing down? What are you talking about that you want? Maybe you're talking about that you want a material possession over peacefulness or contentment or more intimacy with your lover. So just do a check in again, not to judge yourself, but just what do I talk about that I want in my life? Because those are the things that normally is running and what you're pursuing in your life. So that's just a good check in once again on the title of this one. How do we fool ourselves doing the work? And a good check in is just to merely go, what am I pursuing right now? And how can I change that? And if you're not sure, pay attention to the subject you're talking about and to whom you're talking, and see if you can't hone that language just a little bit, which you see is shifting the perception, which will shift the level of intimacy or the level of fulfillment when you do get whatever that is that you want or you prefer.
And dealing with our wants, I think a good practice is to look at where or how we are ourselves preventing ourselves from getting those. So like you mentioned, if somebody wanted to have more intimacy with their person, okay, well, what steps are they taking? Have they cut out, how much time have they had? Are they grounded when they're around them? Like there's so many subtle energy things to adjust to do that. Instead of just saying that you want it, okay, what steps are you taking? Or maybe you just added on another couple hours of work, on your work week. Like we are going to get what we ask for, and we ask for through our actions. So if you if you do have an intention for more vulnerability, then your actions should back it up. But one other thing that like I bring in now, obviously, is a big part of this work is the spiritual level. When I have wants,
Mhm.
constantly redirecting and reminding myself that everything's in divine order, whether I understand it or not, divine timing of when I will receive it. If I do, that understanding to me is undeniable. Like I can't fool myself out of that because I've proven it to myself. So I don't second guess that. So that is a viable answer whenever I feel myself and that inner child wanting to take a fit because I'm not getting what I want or what I think I deserve. I can always slap back with with pillar one.
Yeah, it's very, very helpful to be reminded of that, and if one chooses to truly live in that vision and that understanding, it can resolve a lot, because we were taught to we're a want type of society, and many people don't buy things with the intention of passing it down to their families very much anymore. To see that used to be the main reason of accumulating stuff, is that you accumulated quality stuff so that you could pass it down. And that's another lost art. And yet again, why, I enjoy the vinyl collecting and using all 70s and early 80s equipment, and seeing that this stuff has been around for over 50 some years, and it was built with such quality. And then the people that had it, cared for it all these years, that it just has a completely different energy than things that you buy that are presently being made and created. And of course, that's not just a blank statement across the board, but it's just the majority. And so realizing getting clear and where those wants are being stimulated. And normally those wants are being stimulated by some void in your life. And if you work on correcting and fulfilling that void, then see that external want will dissolve. But if you don't work on fulfilling that void, that external want will always change and it will always be there. And this is where I see in my private practice that most people just, a lot of people are stuck in not being content or not being happy, and they really don't know why. And it's because they're not clear in what voids they have and trying to fulfill with these external wants.
Yeah, that's a great point. Um, and being aware of them goes a long way, so you're not being controlled by them.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously finding contentment wherever you are. This is what all this work does. The Just Philosophy. Again, we have lots more tools and techniques in our various episodes of the Wise podcast. We have a whole library of 160 plus episodes for you to dive into, including our Inward Journey story series, which was fun and creative. I guess we're going to wrap this one up, Alexander. I think we did it justice. Of course, like you said, we keep it simple, but we can always dive deeper. And so many of these topics we can always dive deeper in. So maybe we will on another future episode.
Yeah.
Appreciate everybody out there.
Much love, everybody.
Thank you for listening to this free version of the Wise podcast. To hear the complete conversation and go deeper into the application of the tools and techniques of the Just Philosophy, head on over to wisewisepodcast.com and become a premium member. You'll get to hear all of our complete conversations, including the complete episodes of our Inward Journey story series and our entire back catalog, and continue your self-development journey with us. We honor your dedication to self-growth, overall wellness, and continuing to ask the wise.
And remember, gradual changes over long periods of time equals lasting results.
Continue on your self-growth journey by visiting thejustphilosophy.com, where you are able to connect personally by booking a private consultation with Alexander in person, by phone, or Zoom. Uncover your authentic self more easily with a human design or destiny card consultation. Here you will gain information about your energetic makeup, personality, and your higher self, as well as navigating your way through your relationships. There are also multiple types of reports available for purchase that help you gain insight into your career, relationships, and opportunities for self-growth. The site also allows you to view a calendar of Alexander's live performances and class schedule, peruse other products such as shirts, CDs, and finally, the revolutionary VibroTune vibrational sound therapy tables. These contoured therapy tables allow you to bathe in a vibrational sonic bath of frequencies, bringing you into alignment on all levels. You will be feeling and hearing calming music synced through vibration and frequency. So again, you can grab all this goodness at thejustphilosophy.com, thejustphilosophy.com. The Just Philosophy, as discussed in this podcast, has been developed by Alexander over the last 25 years in his personal studies, private practice, and professional environment. The information discussed is intended for educational purposes only and is not meant as a replacement for conventional medicine. Just remember, knowledge plus experience equals wisdom. Seek the wise. We want to thank you for working on you. Keep shining your light and refining your vibe.